The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Good evening, Delaware, and welcome to The Agenda. Tonight, we continue our series of in-depth conversations with our candidates running for governor, focusing on the most urgent challenges facing our state. And I've made it clear to everyone here that it is education. A new report ranks Delaware 45th in education nationally, with alarming trends, declining test scores, increasing absenteeism, and troubling statistics across the board. This year's numbers show that 55% of children aged 3 and 4 are not yet in school. And the number of high school students not graduating on time nearly doubled from 2019 to 2021, now at 20%. Even more concerning, 75% of fourth graders are not proficient in reading. 82% of eighth graders lack proficiency in math, and 25% of students are chronically absent. Tonight, we are joined by Meyer, Democratic candidate for governor, who has laid out an ambitious vision to turn these numbers around, from raising teachers' salaries to ensuring that every dollar spent is making a difference for students. Meyer promises bold changes. And next week, we'll hear from Republican candidate Mike Ramone, as Delawareans seek a clear plans from both candidates to improve our education system. But now we turn our attention to Meyer. What is his day one plan to tackle these alarming trends? And how will he ensure that these reforms take root? And what will it take to get Delaware back on track? Mr. Meyer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kerwin. It's great to be here on The Agenda.
I appreciate you coming in to talk about these issues. And it's not just because election season. You have been very conversational in regards to this for a long time. I made it clear to both of the candidates on and off the air is that at this point, as a Delawarean, as a parent that is still working to keep my kids in school and getting homework done on time, we are looking for a path forward. Depending on who the governor is, it isn't going to be something that can't go beyond day one. We're looking for day one changes as Delawareans, and there's an expectation there. And whomever the governor is, we need that.
Kerwin, you and many people watching may know me as the county executive. My family and many of my friends know I'm in this business because I'm really a pissed off teacher. I'm running to be actually the first public school educator ever elected governor of Delaware. And like you, I have heard many candidates come before with one solution or another to our problems in our schools and our education system for years and years and years. I can't tell you how many times as a teacher in my classroom, I heard rhetoric. Sometimes I'd be disappointed. Sometimes I'd actually get excited. But ultimately, I would be disappointed when there wasn't actually the delivery to my classroom, to my school, that deliver the meaningful change that we really need. Listen, I moved to Delaware as a child. My parents moved here. Why did they come to Delaware? They came here because housing was affordable. The cost of living was reasonable and the schools were quality. I went to Delaware schools and it enabled me to do incredible things, to go start a business in Kenya, to work as a diplomat embedded with the Army in Iraq, to get a law degree and work as an attorney and ultimately come back home. We need to have the highest quality education system, and we need an education system that's truly equitable. It's not just rhetoric, it is a moral imperative. If you have, let me just tell it like it is, you have black kids on one side of town getting a really, really low quality education in schools where the math proficiency and reading and writing proficiency is in single digits or in the teens, meaning less than 1 in 10 or less than 1 in 5 students in that school are achieving proficiency. And the white kids on the other side of town are going to private schools. Parents have 30, 40 grand to spend. That's a fundamental inequity. And it's something I've worked to address in small ways as county executive because we don't have much control over the budgeting of the schools, but we're committed to working not just on day one, but as every day I serve as your governor. It's a moral imperative. It's not just a policy statement. It's not about getting reelected. It's about who we are as Delawareans. It's about the community we want to build for tomorrow. And it goes, and sorry to keep talking, but it goes beyond education. I mean, how do you have an equal opportunity to get jobs if the education system is so equal? How do you have equal
How do we bring
opportunity in healthcare?
Employers that are making a decision on how, I want to bring in this business. I want to make sure that my employees' children are going to a good school. And that's a factor, because their employees won't follow them through a transition or through a transfer if the area doesn't have good schools. And right now we are fourth from the bottom, fifth from the bottom.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
It's not a good case.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know this. $3.5 billion is the state budget for education, roughly a third, give or take Kerwin math, about the budget. Yet many citizens feel that they're not seeing the benefits of that investment, and that's what it is. It's an investment. How can we justify the amount of money that we're putting in, $3.5 billion, and we're getting these poor results? Like, how can we continually justify it?
So what we got to streamline and get resources to classrooms. We have to give schools, and in some cases classroom teachers, discretion over some of the funding. So I can tell you as a teacher, there were times I would have to go to Kinko's and I don't even know, FedEx, whatever they call it, to get my own photocopies, right? They didn't, schools, it's crazy with the amount of money we're spending that kids are going to classrooms that are not safe in many instances. Kids are going to classrooms where there's nothing that you or I would see that says this is a well-managed, safe classroom. We need to make our schools great places to work. We have to make sure that we're not constantly lagging Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey in salaries. With the $3.5 billion, our school teachers, the personnel who go to the buildings, who are on the front lines of this education crisis, need to be compensated properly. Because what happens when you pay people well, you get people to stay, to continue to work. When you say, okay, we have police officers now starting at $80,000 a year is the starting salary for a Delaware State police officer. And if you chose to go into teaching, and I know most teachers are going to teaching, no, they're not going to make top dollar. They're not making 7 figures or even 6 figures anytime soon. But if you're saying it's going to take 20 years to get to what a state police officer is going to make in their first year, if it's going to take, 10 years to make what a truck driver is making in their first or second year, we have a fundamental problem in our society, and that extends beyond teachers to other staff. So we're going to look hard at how do we make sure we make schools great places to work, great places in terms of compensation, great places in terms of safety. We're also going to do some things that have been talked about a lot, but I don't think many governors have talked about. We're going to look at the districts. I believe the city of Wilmington should have a school district. I believe there should be local control. I was in 3rd grade in North Wilmington when desegregation order came down as a result of, I'm not that old, but as a result of Brown versus Board of Education. And I in 4th grade was bused into the city of Wilmington, into Harlan. And the busing, I think, serves a purpose. But what happens to kids in the city of Wilmington, there aren't many kids like I was when I was being bused into the city of Wilmington. What's actually happened is most Wilmington kids, in fact, just about every Wilmington kid who chooses to do their whole career in traditional public schools would be bused long distances, sometimes to Christina, to Glasgow, from the city of Wilmington. That's not fair. That's a fundamental inequity. We have to make sure we're getting resources to neighborhood schools, we're supporting them appropriately, and there's local control. And all the money can't go to these districts out in the suburbs when the city is being underserved.
So let's talk about the Department of Education when it comes to that. I truly don't understand their role as a citizen, okay? Not as the agenda guy, but as a citizen. I've seen what's happening in Christina School District, and I'm looking for something from the Department of Education in regards to guidance. I'm seeing these numbers. To me, that's where it starts, right? Someone needs a principal, so to speak, to run this whole thing. What is your day one plan for your next Secretary of Education? What are some of the things that you are charging him or her with?
Well, we got to be careful, Kerwin, that I had an opportunity in China. Actually, I went to China for the first time in my life 6 years ago, and we set up a conference call between Delaware kids in Christina School District, Downs Elementary, and Chinese kids who were going to an international school. The Chinese kids were speaking English. These are 4th and 5th grade equivalent kids, 9, 10, 11 years old, speaking with Delaware kids, 9, 10, 11 years old. The Delaware kids spoke Chinese, and the Chinese kids spoke English. I walked out of this room in Beijing with 4 or 5 other American elected officials. One by one, they came to me and they said, I want my kid to go to Delaware public schools. They want to go to Christina School District schools. So there are good things going on. We got to be careful not to use a cliche, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we don't want to say the Department of Education's bad. We got to sort of get rid of the whole thing. I like to say we're going to address the issues in our schools with a scalpel, not with a machete. We're going to go in and say, sorry, my wife's a doctor. We're going to go in and say, here are some things that really are working. What resources do they need? What additional people do they need? What can we do to unlock the power so that those good things grow? And what are the things that really aren't working and need to be shut down or combined with another effort?
So with some of that, because a lot of our school districts rely on programmatics in order to help fill in the gaps and to work with students afterwards, after school, and to bolster some of the curriculum. But a lot of that may not be working with the test scores that we're getting, with the results from the graduation rates and everything that we're getting. One, I don't think all of this can be handled through programmatics. And two, what is the return of investment? How much are we spending on programmatics from these school districts, from these individual schools? Who has the right to determine what goes out financially? And how is the public seeing the results of it?
So we have a formula to fund our schools that is fundamentally flawed. I don't know if you'll find an educational expert on educational funding in the country who will look at Delaware's funding formula and say, you're doing it right. Our funding formula was written in the 1940s.
And who administers that formula? Is that the Department of Education or is that the school districts?
It's by the State Department of Education disseminates the money. So here's, our schools are funded, very simplistically, it's an oversimplification, but basically our schools are funded by local property taxes. So Red Clay School District has a tax rate and you pay your tax bill. Christina School District, Brandywine, Colonial, and the VOTEC do it countywide, right? APO, they all have every year in your property taxes, you got to pay the schools some money. That is subsidized. That in addition to that, there's money that comes from the state. That money from the state, and many school systems across our country are funded that way. Across the country, most states, what they do is they recognize, wait a second, there's a problem when you fund just based on local property taxes. Wealthy areas are going to have well-funded schools. Poor areas are going to have less well-funded schools. And that makes inequalities worse. So in the rich areas, you're going to have very well-funded schools, and the rich people are going to get better education, better free public education, and you're going to have greater opportunity. And the kids growing up, families growing up in poverty who are struggling to make it, they have little shot, nothing close to an equal shot of the American dream, because they're going to schools that are underfunded. What most states do is they then use the state funding to rebalance, to say, okay, to those poor areas, we're going to make sure that here in our state, every kid has an equal shot. Every kid gets an equal allocation, or in some cases, for higher poverty schools, for schools where kids do not know English as a second language, they get additional money because it's more expensive to educate many of those kids. In Delaware, we don't do that. We provide what's called unit count, the same amount to every student. We've been doing it since the 1940s. Think about the values that the people in the 1940s designing this formula probably had for the state of Delaware. It needs to change as a matter of urgency. Now, to Governor...
How hard is that to change?
So to Governor Carney's credit, he didn't change the formula, but he did create something called opportunity funding, which is a series of one-time funds. I think it goes out another year or two, so that there's money to do this balancing. It's sort of in addition to rather than getting the funding formula right. The problem the next governor will have, the problem the Meyer administration will have, is that when that opportunity funding expires, there are these inequities in the formula that need to be addressed.
And if they're not addressed, the problem then reverts back to the way that it was.
Correct.
If in fact that those funds actually fixed it.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and I don't think it's fair to say the funds fixed it, or the opportunity funds fixed it, because not everything's funding. I started this by saying I'm a pissed off teacher. I can't tell you the number of times teaching at Prestige Academy where I read in the newspaper or even have politicians come to my school with some grand announcement, and I think it's exciting, and we're getting resources, and I never see them. Mm-hmm. I never ever see them. So it's incumbent on me as your governor. It's incumbent on whoever I appoint to be Secretary of Education to make sure those resources make it to the classroom. Now, they might make it to the classroom in ways that parents and the PTA and people actually see. It might be in other ways. Maybe it'll be in the form of teacher salaries to make sure that our teachers are really compensated and have not just salaries, but great benefits and great pension. So teachers in the region, if you're a great teacher in Philly public schools, you'll say, whoa, look at what's going on in Delaware. I need to be there. That's the kind of buzz we want to address, because when you do that, you're going to get great educators here. You're going to have great educators staying here, and we're going to be able to be more successful.
The one thing that, and I will talk about, I will compliment Mr. Ramon, but I'm also complimenting you to keep it fair. The way that you're thinking is younger when it comes to the way Delaware is taught. We've had a very old way of thinking. We talked about that in regards to education. What new way are we expecting for you from recruitment of teachers? Like because right now, the way that I see it is we're not going to be able to compete in this market when we have failing schools. We're not paying them well, and you're talking about how to address that. But what are we doing, or hopefully we'll get something from the Secretary of Education to deal with this great recruiting? Like how are we going to think outside? And let's be honest,
it's not just is recruiting among the general population, that's true, but it's also recruiting teachers who are culturally competent. Making sure it's not right if you have students of color who spend all their time in public schools being bused out to the suburbs, right? Assuming they live in the city, being bused to somewhere not familiar to them or their family, and being taught by teachers who don't have the cultural competency to understand where they're from and what their background is. So it's really important in recruitment that we keep that in mind, that there is a severe shortage of teachers of color in Delaware, and that's something we need to address. But more generally, in terms of recruitment and retention, I can tell you stories. Lance Love, I'm going to pick on him for a minute. He's still teaching in Delaware Public Schools, but he left my school because he just had a baby. He's a military veteran who, this is 10 years ago, military veteran. He was, I don't want to say the best, he was the best fifth grade teacher in our school, but we had a lot of best fifth grade teachers, in case any of the colleagues see. He was an amazing teacher who could, African-American, who could speak to kids at Prestige Academy in ways that I couldn't, to be frank. He needed to make $50,000 when just had a baby.
There's no reason why he should not have.
And he couldn't get it, so he left our school. He left our school, he went to teach somewhere else. I believe he ended up winning Teacher of the Year 3 years later at another school. That's not acceptable. We need to make sure compensation is top-notch, but it's more than that. Most teachers I know, just about every teacher I know, ain't in it for the money. Right? So money matters. You can't expect teachers or paraprofessionals, teachers' aides, to come to school and not be compensated enough to feed their family, provide healthcare. We need to be able to say, if you work here 20 years, if you work here 10 years, whatever the pension system is, we're gonna take care of you, right? We're gonna take care of you with healthcare, et cetera. But it's also safety in the classroom. It's also work environment. Yeah. It's also saying that, okay, we're gonna give you tools to teach kids conflict resolution curriculum, right? So yeah, you gotta teach math, and yeah, there are tests, there will be some testing, right? But there's other stuff too. We know that the kids you're teaching today, unlike probably Kerwin when you and I were kids, they really, really need to learn tools of resolving conflict at a young age. Kids need to learn tools of money management and building wealth at a young age, right? Kids maybe need to learn a foreign language at a young age. And we're going to give you those tools that I hope will not only produce educational outcomes that's beneficial to kids and families and our economy and our community, but also makes teaching more enjoyable. I found when I was teaching things that was more relevant to what kids and families were seeing and I was seeing outside of school, it's a much better environment.
flash to bang. That's a military terminology that I use sometimes, but some of the changes that we're talking about are not overnight changes, right? It's going to take years. How long, if elected governor, will Delawareans see their children's education a true difference? Like how long will it take? Change? Yeah.
I think there are some things you're going to see changing within a matter of months. There will be announcements after November 5th, before January 21st, before I'm sworn in, that will indicate a sea change in how some children across our state are educated. I'll say that. But other stuff, it will take a year, 2, 3, I think, to see some of those changes.
Yeah. So what will, in our remaining minutes here, what can you tell Delawareans that are worried, the ones that have come up to me and said, Kerwin, my big thing is education, what do you think? And I tell them, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What could you tell them?
So the issues, it's very easy with the issues we're seeing in our schools to get an obscure budget math and a very detailed policy talk. When you talk to me, it's a moral imperative. It's about my whole service, my whole running for county executive and now governor at some level is about a teacher who, like a Delaware kid who grew up, ended up a diplomat in Iraq, ended up a lawyer, and came home to teach 6th and 7th grade math, who found that the situation is totally unacceptable in 21st century America and 21st century Delaware. You're going to have a leader who worked with urgency to move things. Well, I'd love to tell you in January 2025, I'll be sworn in. You will see everything changed by September 2025. I mean, I'm the guy that went and bought the Hope Center, right? When people say, oh, there's problems with homelessness.
And I think that's what
and we heard that
hoping
for years and years and years. There's problems, and say, okay, and maybe we have a little press conference or cut a ribbon and nothing changes. Yeah. That's not acceptable to me.
Right.
Because I know that there are kids there and there are families there, and in my life, I can name them. And I imagine some of the people watching today can name people too, who know that they are being deeply hurt and our community is being deeply wounded by these statistics that you talked about. And so there needs to be immediate change. Every child in Delaware should be able to go to a school, a public school, and get an excellent education. Every child. Every family should know that when they send their child to a Delaware public school, they're sending their child to somewhere safe and where they're getting access to amazing educators. They're going to teach their kids and prepare them to enter the 21st century world. And every teacher deserves to know that if they buy into our system, if they commit their time and effort to Delaware kids, they're going to be treated right, they're going to be kept safe, and they're going to be given the opportunity for a long-lasting career here in Delaware, where they're not going to have to look to Maryland or Pennsylvania. Maybe they'll want to jump from one school to another for various reasons, but they're going to know that if you come work in Delaware schools, you're going to be treated right.
And what assurances could you give to employers, and there would be promises at this point, that you are producing, your educational system in the state in which you govern is producing the next workforce, quality workforce? Because right now, I don't think that Governor Carney can come in and say that.
Right. I think, well, in the first place, to leaders in the workforce, you're our partners in this. You're not. I don't expect workforce leaders. If you're in a small business, if you're a manager at J.P. Morgan, I don't think you should just sit back and say, "Oh, Matt's going to fix the schools, and we're going to wait till they're fixed." And look at the resumes, and we'll see an improvement in the resumes, and we'll know.
Right.
I want you to participate in it. I want you to understand that if there's a single third grader in the state of Delaware who's not reading on grade level, right? That's all of our problems. It's shared service, shared sense of responsibility, but also just know I'm someone who will take action. As I mentioned, the Newcastle County government, no county government in the state has really any real control over schools.
Yeah.
I am someone who has a computer science background, who's passionate about kids having opportunities in math and tech. We created a program with called 1,000 Kids Coding in partnership with Code Differently. You know how much money I had to start 1,000? You want 1,000 Delawarean kids to learn coding. They're not learning in school. Pretty much 100% of them are using these phones, but they're not learning how to develop apps on the phone. That's fundamentally wrong. I want to make sure they learn how to program apps. It's easy to say, but You need money to do it.
And it's been successful.
We had no money.
Right.
We had no money. I went and begged. I went to Capital One. I went to JP Morgan. I went to Barclays. I went to area banks. I went to foundations. I said, just give us a few coins to start this program. We started it thanks to the work of Stephanie Eldridge, Tariq Hook, and the folks at Code Differently, Vanessa Phillips, who you know, on my team, Autumn Tuxford, and we put together a program. And we did it, I think, the first year with 30 kids. Now, I think this summer, close to 200 students. We've, over 1,100 students have gone through our program. Code Differently. It's after school, it's summer, and now close to 100 students have gotten jobs, paying jobs, before they graduate high school, or certainly within a few years after high school, paying jobs from JP Morgan through this program. Those are the kind of programs we need. I believe, as county executive, I've done them outside of school, which is great. I hope my successor continues it, but we're also going to look, how do we incorporate that into the education, not just at the junior high and high school, not just in middle school and high school, but also at the elementary school level. Make education engaging to kids. Make part of it, listen, it's easy to blame the system and say, here are the things we need to do to, more funding and more that, but a lot of it is about change. How do we make our curriculum more responsive? I often felt as a teacher who'd spent time in the private sector that our education system, the curriculum, was something like designed in the 19th century that we were trying to tinker with to make appropriate for the 21st century Delaware. And we're going to take a hard look, everything from conflict resolution, technology to foreign language. What do adults need? What do young adults need to cope and be successful? Sometimes mental health skills. What do they need to be successful in a 21st century Delaware? And that's what we're gonna work to deliver in partnership with the community.
And transparency as well. I hope that it will be shown to public, and we do a good job of this with freedom of information, but I know there's a lot of Delawareans that want to know, where is all this money going for education? And then rank it in terms of effectiveness. And non-effective programs should not be funded the same just because it's another fiscal year. Oh, well, they met all of their grant requirements and they've reported properly and everything. So now we're going to hit them again for another $200,000.
One thing we've seen in recent years, particularly in state government, is that political insiders, I'm just telling it like it is, political insiders have a different deal than you and I do.
Absolutely.
When you're a political insider and you take money from our unemployment insurance fund at Department of Labor, there's hardly an investigation. The Public Integrity Commission reasons that, there's nothing we can do, we can't prosecute. There's like over $100,000 of unemployment insurance money missing. They know who did it, he passed away, okay? But there needs to be a full investigation, needs to be open to the public. When I had students at Prestige Academy on the east side of Wilmington, when their parents, brothers, mostly brothers, occasionally sisters, were getting in trouble, the Attorney General never had problems prosecuting. There never were these issues. They weren't connected that way. We need to end this game of political insidership, because I think I mentioned that with respect to funding, because when you do that, you find there are all these pockets of money. They're just being wasted. In some sense, fraud, sometimes just waste and abuse. And when we went to the county, we took a line by line look. We uncovered about $5 million of money, of savings, right? Everybody said, the budget's impossible, there's no money here. $5 million of savings that could be better used. So we did things, ultimately used it for things like 1,000 kids coding, took some of the money, actually gave it back to taxpayers. First property tax cut that any county executive has implemented. We implemented. And so we're gonna do things differently. And we're gonna make sure that every dollar is tracked and that we look hard at programs, first for fraud, waste, and abuse, but also, as you mentioned, just for ineffectiveness. Okay, nobody's stealing, nobody's doing anything wrong, but this isn't working.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here. Mr. Matt Meyer has told us his day one plan. I've asked for it, and they have delivered it. Next week, you will hear from Mr. Mike Ramone, and he will give his plan as well. I'm very excited about this conversation. I look forward to another great conversation with Mr. Ramone and help you decide on Election Day who's your choice. You've heard it here, you've heard it accurate, you've heard it on the record right here on the agenda. Look forward to seeing you next week right here.